Good morning. Happy New Year. Yes, something to be happy about. So as you can see from the screen here, the topic for me today is the thing itself. The thing itself. So it comes from a tradition. There's a tradition in our teaching that has been going on for decades, I don't know how long, many years, to present the introduction to the Science of Mind textbook in January. And this is something that ministers, like I say, have been doing for a long time. The reason that you don't know that is that I've never done it. Because I'm just not prone to accept other people's traditions. I like my own traditions, but it's just never called to me to do that. And after the year we've just completed, I thought, wow, we really need to get back to some basics here to make sure that we're all just really grounded in this teaching as we move into the year that has a little light at the end of the tunnel. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today, is the first chapter in the Science of Mind text called The Thing Itself. Dr. Holmes begins that conversation by giving the divine a name, the thing itself a name that I'm going to have to read to get it absolutely right. So give me just a moment here. Yes, he calls it the creative intelligence of the universe. The creative intelligence of the universe. Now, he uses the word God lots of times, but he doesn't start with that. He wants us to know that there's something about this that we wouldn't get if we just said God. And I would imagine that most all of us, if a conversation started where somebody said, I'm going to talk about God, still most of us would, in our minds, go to a place of a spiritual being, a creative spiritual being, no doubt, an all-knowing, an all-powerful being that identifies as male. He, him, right? Is that how they say it? Okay, so that's what most people on the planet, even beyond the name God, the name Allah or Jehovah or lots of other names for this, all comes to this idea of a deity that's a being. But frankly, I don't believe that God's a being. All-powerful, all-knowing. The thing that I want to say about this idea of God not being a being is that if God were a being, how could it be all-knowing and all-powerful when so much of what being all-powerful is about is beyond any one entity? Because power exists all through the universe. If God were a being, that wouldn't make sense, that all the power in the universe could be from that being or in that being. So God's got to be something bigger than that, bigger than just all-powerful, all-knowing. God has to be all time, all space, all form, all energy. That has to be what God is, and something far beyond that. But what's important is to understand that if we get stuck in that idea of God being outside of us and being an entity somewhere in the universe or beyond the universe perhaps, that wouldn't give us the thing that we need to function within this teaching and to know the truth of who we are. So the thing itself has to be something greater than that. And one thing that Holmes calls it, he says, the way he describes it in the Science of Mind is that he says, we have a conscious mind that operates within a subjective field which is creative. So he's describing the thing itself, that it's really mind. And that mind is the foundational essence of everything, because thought is creative. Well, thought is initiative, and the law is creative. And I'll explain all this as we move forward. But we start with this idea of mind and find that the presence of the divine dwells as mind. Now, you have mind, right? You've got a mind. Actually, it's a little more complicated than that. Yes, we all have individualized the divine as the mind that we use in our lives, as we think consciously. It's called conscious mind. And we each have that. And although there is really only one mind, we have found a way to, or Spirit has created this way, that when that mind is in us and is conscious, that we relate to that and we use that every moment of our lives. But there's this other part of mind, and maybe it's time to show this. It's called subjective mind. And in what I just read about Holmes, he said that it's a subjective field. It is. It's a field of possibility. And mostly we think conscious mind is what we're thinking, and subjective mind is our memories. And that's true, but it's more than that. It's bigger than that. And what Holmes suggests is that you don't have a subjective mind. You don't have your own little container of mind that holds all of your memories and all of the activities of your life, that there truly is just one mind. And although you've individualized it in your conscious mind, the part where you think, everything else about mind is all collective. It's all one thing. So I came up with some ways to try to decipher these two ideas of mind and why it's important to understand that. And the first one is that conscious mind really, everything's spirit. But we call conscious mind spirit because it's the initiator of creation. We think a thought. We have an idea. And that goes into the subjective mind, which is the law of spirit. That law of spirit is what actually does the creating. And you don't own that. But it collects every thought you've ever had and holds on to it and uses that to activate the activities of your life. In your conscious mind, you're able to reason and choose and direct your thinking in certain directions. You can change your mind. You can't change the subjective mind. Well, actually you can, but you don't just do it by flipping a switch the way you do in your conscious knowing. I make it easy. I used to like chocolate, but now I really like vanilla. That's a choice. That's a reasoned choice, a decision, a choice that you want to have in your life. What subjective mind does with that is it responds to it. It makes that feeling of enjoying the vanilla ice cream more because you've chosen it, because that's your preference. So you choose, you respond, I don't want to use respond, but you make your choices in conscious mind, and then you turn it over to this subjective field, and it creates your life. It's doing it for all of us all of the time. It responds to whatever we give it. So we have thoughts in our conscious mind. We're thinking all the time. But all of our beliefs and our memories are all held in subjective mind forever. And it doesn't go away. Now, here's the interesting thing about this is that one of the things that we teach in our Science of Mind class is this idea of what is it called? Beliefs that you have, hidden beliefs. Hidden beliefs that people have that still run their lives, but they're hidden because in our conscious mind, we forgot that we believed that. We forgot that was important. We just kind of put it down in a way, but it didn't go away. It's always still there. So that's why often in our lives we see things happen and we go, but I don't want that in my life. Yeah, maybe it was like that once, but I don't want that in my life. Well, you have to consciously change it, and you have to consciously let your subjective mind or the subjective mind know that that's where you're coming from now, that you've made changes. And sometimes it takes a few times to get it through to where it actually will become the thing that is guiding your life as a belief or a memory in subjective mind. We do all our work in conscious mind, but the work in subjective mind is essential to making this entire thing work. We initiate in conscious mind. I think I already said that. And the law, the subjective mind, creates from it. So that's why we have to be so careful in what we think, so conscious of what we think, and not just let rambling thoughts influence our life and go into subjective mind and influence what's happening in our lives. I had one other one that I came up with that I wanted to suggest as a way to envision this, and it's a computer thing. Conscious mind is like RAM, your random access memory in your computer. It's the stuff that's not saved. But as soon as you save it, well, now many of us still have a hard drive where that stuff is saved. But eventually, what is going to happen in the world of computers is that it's all going to be held in the cloud. And that we're just going to have a not this kind of computer we have now, but we'll have a terminal that will connect to the cloud and get all the information that we want. And when that happens, this idea works that the conscious mind is your random access memory, and that the subjective mind is like the cloud, where it keeps all of it. I read something on the internet the other day. The internet never forgets. It's true. So be mindful about what you put on Facebook, especially when you're in a bad mood, because it won't go away. Even if you take it off of your Facebook page, chances are somebody else kept it with your name on it. So just be mindful of how you're doing that. And the same is true in how we relate to mind. The same is exactly that way. Now, why is this important? Well, what Holmes says about this, and he says this in the first chapter, he says that conscious use of subjective mind is the greatest discovery of all time. The greatest discovery of all time. And I believe he's right. Because if we want to live that loving, harmonious, healthy, meaningful, prosperous life, it's all dependent on us. The environment does not create us. We create us by what we think and by what we impose or put upon subjective mind. What we impress, that's Holmes's word, what we impress upon subjective mind. Because when we do, we get the result back. And it's essentially important to understand that. And if we have things in our past that we're still hanging on to in that subjective way, the way to change it is to clearly have a different idea and to state that to yourself and know that within yourself over and over and over again, so that becomes the guiding action that subjective mind puts out into your life. This is critically important to make our lives work. It's powerful too. Once you understand that, wow, wouldn't it be cool if they actually taught children this in school? Wouldn't it be a different world if everybody knew this? And I'm sure that's why Holmes said it is what it is. So why is this important? It's important because when anyone can absolutely embrace this idea and never, ever veer from it, being conscious about what's going into subjective mind, what's being given to the creative force of the universe about me, if I can do that, it's going to change things. It's going to change whether or not I suffer. Because if I'm being conscious, I wouldn't need to suffer about anything. It would have everything to do with our idea about freedom. Holmes loves to talk about freedom. And I'm going to talk about freedom a little more in a minute. But the idea of being free comes from knowing how you're creating your life. And it would also reveal our divine nature to us and everyone else. And we could see that. The challenge here is that none of us have really got this completely down. We all still have those thoughts that undermine the life we want to live. And when we think those thoughts over and over again, when we come up against a wall and we don't know what to do, and we claim that we don't know what to do, and we live in that place, we get stuck. But when we remember the truth that we have all knowledge available to us, when we can live our lives however we choose to do it, when that happens, we get a different life. We live a different life. That's why this is so incredibly important. So I want to talk about this idea of freedom because it's kind of something that's happening in our culture right now. Americans generally have always revered the idea of freedom. We want to be free. It's our founding documents are based in that we are free. And how do we want to be free? Well, we want to be free to own firearms. We want to be free to travel anywhere in the United States that we choose to travel without anybody restricting us in any way. We want to be free to prosper, and we want to be free to pursue happiness. Again, founding documents promise us that we get this. Okay. Well, along comes the pandemic of 2020. And suddenly, we're acting as a culture much more like other cultures around the world, other countries around the world who value and revere safety, way over freedom. Take away my freedoms, but keep me safe. And that's kind of where we're going right now. It's kind of what's happening in our culture. And now, I'm not suggesting this is either good or bad. It's just what I'm seeing happening. That when people are polled now in this country, they want everybody to wear a face mask. Where there are lots of folks that go, no, I have a right not to do that. And, I respect everybody's right to do it the way they want to do it until they come to the front door. And then we got to do something different because it's true. And this is what I've had people that no longer come here tell me is that they know within themselves that by being clear about their own being safe, that they will not contract this virus, that they will be safe. And I'm going, okay, I believe that you can do that. Problem is, we have no way to check your consciousness at the door. So instead, we check your temperature and ask you to wear a mask when you come in and when you leave. And that seems to fill the bill, but some people see that as not having the freedom to move around as they would like to move around. So we're learning how to adapt to some of this. And I'm not suggesting this is an evolving structure within our culture. It's just what's happening right now. And I'm sure it'll change as time moves on. But as I said, Holmes talks about freedom, and the freedom he's talking about is the freedom to know the truth of who we are, the freedom to create our experience and not to be afraid of getting something from somebody else. And I've been as guilty of being suspicious of other people as anybody you know. Is it safe to do this, to have them here? Are they wearing their mask? I'm in the same boat that most of us are, which just points out that I too can look out into the environment to find my answers. I don't find many answers out there because truly the answers are all happening within me. So that's what I've got to work on. So we're all on this evolving trek of figuring out how to apply these principles of the thing itself so that we can live in this world effectively. And we're all on the path. We're all finding our way. Some may be finding it faster than others, and that's perfectly okay. If life is eternal and we live multiple lives, which I believe, I'm not speaking for the science of mind with that, but it seems ridiculous that 60, 80 years 90 years would be enough in the eternity of all life for us to experience this thing called life. Okay, so that's the way it seems to me is that we have lifetimes to figure all this out. And as we figure it out, I think we become a more evolved culture, a more evolved species. So we're on the path. We're doing the work, all at our own pace in our own way, finding out how this will work for us. Our job here is to pay attention to what we're thinking because that's creating our life. And when we understand that and apply that, life really does get different. So the bottom line is, what do you believe? What's in your subjective field that isn't supporting you anymore? Now, you really can't go find it until it comes up. But be mindful as you do this that you can become more aware by the experiences of your life, especially the gifts of receiving things that you don't want. They are the most amazing gifts because they point out that there's something in our consciousness that we put into subjective mind that isn't serving us. And the thing to ask when that thing comes up is not, how do I get rid of this thing? Is, what am I trying to remember here? What am I trying to know about my life that's going to help this not be part of it? And there's always an answer. It's always there. You just got to look, and you got to be still and be with it until you get it. So I want you all to know that I think I'm married to one of the most brilliant metaphysicians of all time. And although she's not actively teaching right now, and I know a number of you have come to me and said, when Barbara going to teach again? I don't know. It's not mine to choose. It's for her to decide and know what she wants to do. But yet she's still touching people around the world. And to explain what I'm talking about, I want to tell you the story of two women. One woman named Maureen is currently in Johns Hopkins University Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. She lives in the D.C. area with her husband, and I'm not sure whether her son lives with them or not, but she has been diagnosed with stage 4 abdominal cancer, stomach cancer. And apparently she was at a point where she was in the hospital in intensive care and had lost consciousness and had to be put on a respirator. She has a sister named Grace who lives in Atlanta. And Grace really wanted to help her sister, but she had no idea what to do. She and her sister and her whole family, of course, were raised in a Christian environment, so she knew she could pray. But she wasn't feeling fulfilled in that process. She wanted to do more for her sister. So she was bouncing around the internet. Guess who she found? She found Dr. Barbara Waterhouse. And Dr. Barbara Waterhouse taught her that the presence of the divine was within her and that she had the ability to change conditions in her life by being absolutely clear about who she was and bringing that power into any circumstance to manifest a different condition. So she kept watching Barbara, and she looked up other videos about Barbara, and she found me, and she watched a couple of mine, but then she went back to Barbara. And she said what came to her in that was clearly to treat for her sister, but she didn't know this 5-step thing we teach. All she knew is that she wanted her sister to be better. So she sat in her home and she called out to her sister because her sister couldn't breathe. And the doctors were saying they were going to have to take her off this respirator to see if she could breathe again or if she was just going to die. So she's calling out to her sister, saying, "Breathe, Maureen, breathe. Breathe, Maureen. Breathe, breathe." And she said she was calling out the top of her lungs. Probably scared her husband to death. So about that time, back in that hospital room at Johns Hopkins, suddenly they removed this breathing tube, this respirator, and immediately Maureen started breathing. Wow. She wasn't out of the woods here. This was one piece of it. Another piece of it was she couldn't eat because of the cancer, and she wasn't able to hold food down. And she was still in a bit of this comatose state. So Grace continued her work, loving her sister, knowing her sister was awake and alert. The next day, someone at the hospital called in Maureen's husband. And when he got there, they presented him with a document, a do not resuscitate document, that they were insisting that he sign, so that even though she was breathing, her state had not changed that much. And he said, "Wow, I have to talk to my wife, or I have to see my wife before I sign anything." So he went to his wife's room and he opened the door, and she was sitting up smiling. She invited him in. She wanted to know if he was paying the bills. and of whatever else they talked. Before he left that day, she asked him to leave his phone, and he did. And the first thing that Maureen did was call her sister, Grace. They had a lovely conversation. Grace said she didn't know if she'd ever hear from her again. And the next day, Maureen managed to get some food down and keep it down. Now, I'm not suggesting we here in the teaching of the science of mind are defying death. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we have the full capacity to influence the conditions of our lives and the people that ask us to do that for them. It's a powerful notion, still highly underutilized, but it's the thing itself that makes this work. It's this idea of mind that makes this work. And my gratitude is to you, Barbara Waterhouse, for understanding the thing itself and for sharing it with the world in so many wonderful ways. I am so grateful and so honored to be on this journey with you. And thank you for knowing how it works. But that's chapter 2, and we'll talk about that next week. For now, we'll leave it right there. God bless you. I love you all.